My husband's controlling behavior made me sick, so I decided to move in with AP. He just laughed, and then Benjamin, my husband or my ex-husband, male 37, and I, female 32, met at the mall in Philadelphia. I was going with my friends. Well, that day, my friends and I had decided to just go out to get some fresh air. Since it was a very hot day, we were wearing short outfits that revealed our flawless skin. So when we went to have our lunch at some restaurant, name withheld for personal reasons, Benjamin came in with his friends also. My eyes got drawn to him. The way he was laughing somehow got to me, without him even approaching me. Days passed and the handsome Ben, I called him that, texted me and asked to take me out. Yes, I was happy, but he wasn't as romantic as I thought he would be. His personality didn't match his appearance. It was totally different, but nonetheless, I fell in love with him. I also don't know how, but I did, and I somehow regretted it after he had shown me his very true colors, a few months after we got married. I was a vibrant and free-spirited soul, while Ben was rigid and domineering. I think me being free-spirited came to Benjamin as somehow a threat. I don't how, but the way he was acting made me think that maybe he had some insecurity tendencies. I loved to express myself through fashion and enjoyed experimenting with different styles. Even though my controlling husband, Ben, had always struggled with my sense of self-expression, especially when it came to my choice of clothing. Anyway, Benjamin and I started dating after I think 6 or 7 months of being friends. I won't lie and say I was not enjoying his company because I was. He was a very smart person, funny yet reserved. He had big dreams for his uprising real estate company. Our future goals and plans collided, you know. We had big dreams for us and our future. I loved how supportive he was towards my dreams and our relationship. Benjamin started being very controlling and manipulative to a point that I somehow find it scary because I didn't understand where he had gotten his behavior. I would sometimes think it was work stress or pressure, but no, it wasn't anything like that. His behavior continued up to a point that he wouldn't even try and hide it, even if we were in public. What surprised me a lot was the fact that he was busy staring at the girls who were wearing short and revealing outfits. He would even zone out staring at them, and I wouldn't say anything about that. But to me, and he would complain telling me that my clothes were for body sellers who didn't love themselves. He dictated everything in our relationship, from the way I dressed to the friends I could have. I knew that if I wanted to break free, I needed to do something drastic. So during winter holidays, we would have our families coming over either during Thanksgiving or Christmas, one of the holidays. That time we had decided or planned to host a Christmas Day lunch since the previous year we were hosting for Thanksgiving. My husband, or must I say my ex-husband, was very happy that we would be hosting Christmas Day lunch. He loved Christmas days, plus he was born on the 25th of December on a Christmas Day, meaning we would be celebrating his birthday and Christmas Day. Christmas was just around the corner, and I had planned to wear a revealing outfit to the Christmas lunch. It wasn't too revealing, it just showed my boobs and thighs. It was a red dress that clung to my curves and showed off my legs. I knew it was revealing, but I also knew it would make a statement. It was the dress I saw at the mall and I fell in love with it, plus it was red, so I decided to rock it on Christmas Day. I was excited about the lunch. I would get to spend time with both my family and Ben's family, plus celebrating his birthday, which would be the first time celebrating his birthday in our house. Little did I know that my choice of attire would lead to a life-changing event. I couldn't believe it, you know. As the day of Christmas and Benjamin's birthday approached, I carefully picked out my beautiful, yet slightly revealing dress that made me feel glamorous. I wanted to surprise my husband on his big day and the day to spend with family. I wanted to be beautiful for him. I had hoped that he would love my dress and compliment me since it was long yet revealing a little. Everyone complimented me on my dress. My husband, on the other hand, just grew more and more upset. I was excited to show off my confidence and enjoy Christmas Day and my hubby's birthday with our loved ones. I believed that Christmas was the perfect occasion to express myself and showcase my unique style. However, when Benjamin saw my outfit, he became furious and insisted that I change into something more conservative. He actually confronted me and demanded that I change my outfit or not attend the Christmas gathering at all. He claimed it was inappropriate and disrespectful to him as my husband. You know, I was, taken aback by his sudden outburst, tried to reason with him, explaining that I should have the freedom to express myself and feel comfortable in my own skin. I reluctantly agreed to change my outfit, but deep down I couldn't shake off the feeling that my husband's controlling behavior was becoming suffocating. He literally humiliated me in front of our families and his friends. I was so hurt by the way he handled everything. He should have asked to speak to me aside, not to just burst and talk to me like I was a non-living factor. I was so disappointed in him. I didn't even know what his issue was because my dress was not extremely revealing. I went to the bedroom to change, which took much time to find a dress that would make Benjamin happy. I couldn't help but feel resentful towards Ben for stifling my individuality. As the day progressed, I noticed how confident and empowered the family's sisters and cousins looked during the celebration, embracing their unique styles. I just couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy. As the day went on, the celebration was finished and people had started leaving. I made a decision that would change my life forever. I took off my conservative dress, revealing the outfit I had originally chosen. With newfound courage, I walked up to Ben and expressed my desire to be true to myself, even if it meant facing the consequences. Feeling trapped and suffocated by his controlling nature, I mustered up the courage to stand up for myself. I was tired of Benjamin's bullying and controlling tendencies. I firmly expressed that I should have the freedom to wear what made me feel comfortable and confident. I told him, well, more like reminding him that he had found me wearing revealing outfits, and he fell in love with me while I was wearing those revealing outfits, and he didn't have a problem with that up until we got married. I asked him if he would want to start changing me when we were married, and not when we were still in the dating phase. To my surprise, Ben's reaction was not what I had expected. Instead of understanding my perspective, he stormed out of the house, leaving me feeling both liberated and heartbroken. The weight of my broken marriage was heavy on my shoulders, but deep down, I knew I had made the right choice. I knew that when Ben came back, I would have lost him. I know he loved being respected as the man of the house, and the fact that I had said all that in front of the family that was remaining. He surely felt disrespected and humiliated by me. It was just a matter of time till he told me what I had been expecting to hear. Later on, he came back from wherever he was coming from. When he came back at midnight, I had started to get worried about him because he wasn't the type of man that would go to clubs until midnight. Yes, he would go out with his friends for drinks, but he had never come back at midnight. So when he came back, he told me that we needed to talk about my behavior and the disrespect that I had shown in front of his family and mine. You know when they say, a drunk man never tells no lies because when they are drunk, they become their true self. Take that phrase seriously because as much as I didn't want to listen to Ben speaking to me while drunk, I had to. But Ben's controlling tendencies had reached the breaking point. He coldly declared that he could no longer be with someone who didn't adhere to his strict rules and expectations. On Christmas Day, when love and togetherness should have prevailed, he callously dumped me, leaving me heartbroken and alone. So he started telling me how much he loved me and how much he held me in high regards, but I had disappointed him. He continued telling me that even if he loved me, he wouldn't tolerate disrespect and humiliation from a woman. He kept blabbing up until he actually released the lump that he had been holding that made him speak in riddles for too long. He told me that he cannot be with me anymore. He believed that I would change my attitude and behavior and somehow become a wife to him, but instead I got worse than ever. I got really tired and fed up with Benjamin's tendencies, so I decided to just live my life just the way I wanted to be. Yes, I was married and I loved my husband so much, but his behavior was just sickening. I knew that if I had stayed and tolerated his behavior furthermore, I would end up either losing myself or my life. Ben was just possessive and obsessive for no reason. Till this day, I still say that what I did to my husband was the root of it, while more like his behavior was what drove me to find happiness outside my marriage. So I started going out on solo dates. The stress and tension was too much. Going out really helped me. I once heard a phrase that says, when a lady is stressed, shopping is the best therapy, which was not true to me because I was not a person who took shopping as therapy. So shopping was not what would make me happy or forget about what was happening in my house. I then started going out, going on solo dates or visiting the clubs in Vegas. I was trying to pass time, you know. I couldn't stay cooped up in the house for the longest time because I didn't even know when my husband would have time for me again. I missed him so much, you know. Even our intimate moments were no longer the same. Since I was so bored in the house, I decided to just go out at least 2 or 3 times a week if I was free. I would go out to a spa maybe and pamper myself. I mean, my husband was moneyed and he was taking good care of me even though I also had my own money. And my parents were still sending me money for allowance. I was just secured and happy, you know. So all the money that I was getting, I decided to open a secret account that would save my money on. What infuriated me the most was the fact that he had become an uncontrollable control freak. Another thing is when he would just doze off during a serious conversation and always get tired after one round of our intimate moment. It was really a turnoff for me because I wouldn't reach my climax and he would leave me hanging and fall asleep. It was no longer fun in our marriage, and I hated that. I mean, why introduce me to fun stuff and good things, then leave me hanging when I become an addict? I was just a weirdo and a shy girl who lived with her parents and had no friends or whatsoever. But I got involved with Ben. He introduced me to a lot of stuff that includes intimacy. He introduced me to it, and I got hooked. I loved being intimate and being freaky with him, just like how he had taught me. But he wasn't there anymore to satisfy my needs and desires. I didn't want to go outside my marriage and break my wedding vows, but I was driven by his actions, desires, and greed, I think. Time passed. I was starting to enjoy my solo dates, going to check on my work, then visit clubs. It was somehow therapeutic for me, and it made me kind of forget about my miserable marriage. I mean, we didn't even have children, for Christ's sake, so what my husband was doing made me think that even if we were to have children, that means those children would also suffer to get his attention. I was somehow glad that we didn't have any children or the talk of having any children because they were going to suffer like I was. I started getting compliments from other men, as much as I wished I was getting those compliments from my husband, but I was starting to enjoy it. There's that great feeling and increased self-esteem and confidence whenever you get a compliment from someone, either your partner or a stranger. Imagine being with someone you only see twice on weekdays. He comes home when you're asleep and lives early in the morning. When he is at home, he is in his office and he doesn't want to be bothered unless you would be bringing him something to eat or snack on, or he sees something to complain about. I didn't know what to do anymore because he was not even paying any attention to my concerns. As much as I needed his time and attention, I was really concerned about his health. He was too attached to his work to a point that he would just lock himself in his study or small office room the whole day. So you see how much I cared for Ben, even with his controlling tendencies? I was really worried about him, and the connection that we had was slowly fading. I had been patient for way too long. I mean, even the heart that loves also gets tired, right? And love alone was not enough if there was no connection and affection. We were more life room or housemates because we were staying in the same house, sleeping on the same bed, but the connection was no longer there. I had known there and then that I had really lost my husband, not to any lady or whatever, but I lost him to his work and the way he was controlling. Time passed. He started going on his business trips for months, leaving me in the house. What did he think I was getting attention from? So I went out more often. Well, more like going to clubs more often. The way I was so stressed, I almost got myself drinking anxiety pills because of the way my husband was acting. It was stressing me out. So one night I had decided to go to the club just to unwind, you know. When I arrived, it was packed, and to find out that there was an event happening. It was a great distraction for me and my mind. I needed it, and I felt alive again. I forgot all about my marriage problems and my sudden changed husband. I drank carelessly to a point that I didn't even know my name. So I hooked up with some guy that I had met at the club, and we actually made out in one of the restrooms, not thinking and knowing that the guy was actually taking a video of us making out. Such a pervert. One thing I loved about myself was that I would always remember everything that I had done when I was intoxicated. But that night, even God was my witness. I was way out of it, and I didn't remember anything that had gone down. I hooked up with a guy called Paul Martin, male, 34. The guy was so funny, handsome, and he was just a breath of fresh air. We just clicked, you know, the conversations between us were flowing. It was like we had known each other for a very long time. We had a great time together. Then from there, we became close friends. He became my shoulder to cry on. He gave me advice without judging me. My marriage lacked happiness, attention, affection, and time. That guy gave me all that. He made me feel alive and took me back to the times when my husband and I were still getting to know each other. We drank, danced, and ate. It was a lot of fun. I felt alive and free again. I felt like I was my old self. Not that I was going out and getting drunk, but I was free and happy. I missed being my old self, not a jailed wife. Was I wrong to choose myself for once? Paul's personality was matching my expectations. We had some drinks, and before I knew it, we were in a car. His car, to be specific. We made out in a car, and it was a great experience for me. I really loved the way he was doing me, the way he touches every sensitive spot on my body. I just couldn't get enough of him. What he was doing was just so magical and on top of the world. The man really knew how to explore, eh? Paul and I couldn't get enough of each other, so we ended up doing more than one round that day. Since then, we have formed something kind of a relationship or an affair. We would meet up in our secret spot outside Washington because I was kind of scared that my husband would somehow find out about my affair with Paul. And if he was to find out, I should be expecting the worst. My husband, or must I say my ex-husband, may be the sweetest and humble guy ever, but when he gets angry, the world would have floods and tornadoes, all of it at the same time. My affair with Paul was purely and strictly an intimate affair. No feelings were involved. I knew that I loved my husband so much and I wouldn't want that to end. I love Ben. In fact, I still love him so much, and I don't think there would ever be someone that I would ever love like I love him. My marriage meant a lot to me. I know that what I did was very stupid and selfish of me. I had not only jeopardized my marriage, but I had broken my wedding vows that I had made in front of my whole family. I committed adultery knowing very well that I was married. I had thought that maybe I was the problem. I started doubting myself. I had thought that maybe I was no longer enough for him, or I had changed and got ugly. What was I supposed to think? I started having low self-esteem. I was sinking deep into depression, but luckily I had Paul to destroy me from my sorrows. He was everything and more. I told my parents about what was going on in my marriage, and the advice I got was, in marriage you have to be patient with your husband. Just make sure not to make something that would drive him away from your marriage. I didn't understand that kind of advice because it was useless and pathetic. Days later, my husband once asked me if I was still happy in our marriage. Stupid me, instead of being honest, I lied and told him that I was still happy. I know it was a pretty dumb move that I had done, and I regretted not being honest in the first place, because honesty and communication is the key to successful marriage and relationships, right? But I chose to be a liar and a fool out of my husband, not knowing that he actually had a video and he knew the truth. It was just that he wanted me to come clean and confess everything to him, but I failed. About a week later, my husband had been home a lot lately, and it really surprised me because I even forgot when was the last time I had seen him around the house. The worst part was not being locked up in his office, working. As much as it was supposed to make me happy, but I was not, especially for the sudden change of heart. He would still tell me that he loved me, but I didn't, and I couldn't believe it anymore. I mean, there were a lot of loopholes in his act, and it was really alarming. One would think we were so much in love and would look like the perfect couple ever. But I knew my husband, and he was hiding something from me, and I had to try and find out what he was really hiding. I was so unstoppable. I was just hooked in the lovemaking that I was doing with Paul. I didn't care much about my husband anymore. I mean, I had got on my feet and I was getting what I had been desiring for the longest time. So I would just leave Benjamin in the house sometimes and tell him that I was going to meet up with someone while I was going to meet up with Paul in our secret location. Little did I know that the bubble that I was in would soon be busted, and it was not going to be very nice. I had changed, you know. The way I was doing things was really not the shy and weird Tamia, myself. I became the person that I would not even recognize. I had started lying a lot to Benjamin about my whereabouts, and I would wear revealing clothes. I'm sure Benjamin would see that I was lying about where I was going at times because of the way I was wearing and where I said I was going to. I really don't know what was happening to me, but whatever it is that was happening, I totally regret it. It changed me in the worst way possible. Even my parents would be concerned about me. But little did they know that I was actually having an affair with a guy who drove me crazy with his intimate action. One day I had lied to Ben about where I was going. Forgetting that I had married the IT specialist, I didn't know that he had access to my phone, though I had once suspected since he loved sitting on computers a lot. I told him that I was visiting my friend Lawrence, not knowing that he already had information of where I was going. So I met up with Steve in the restaurant. We went there to order something to eat before going to our secret spot. It is a 30 minutes drive from my marital house to the restaurant. If I knew that on that day the universe wouldn't be on my side, I wouldn't have gone to meet up with Paul. Paul and I got into our secret location, and without wasting any time, we got into what we did best. We made so much of S****, and it was so wild. It was like we knew that it was going to be our last day together. The way things were happening, I should have known that something big was going to happen, but with my nonchalant self, I didn't even notice. I was just so caught up in a small bubble that Steve and I were in. We were really enjoying each other's time and affection. That time, Paul and I were deeply in intimacy. We were doing all those nasty and freaky things. Paul really knew his things and had a lot of experience in this intimacy department. He knew what he was doing. It was like he was trained, you know. The way he was so gentle with a woman's body, it was like he had learned it from the book or at school. Somehow I wished that it was at least my husband who was doing all those things to me, but it was just a random man that I had got from the club, and that man called himself Paul. So during our intimate moments, Paul bluntly told me to move in with him. You know when someone tells you something while you are enjoying what they are doing to you? Your mind doesn't function very well to a point that you don't even think of what you are saying and the impact that would take place when everything happens. Paul really tricked me with that. Yes, I had told him that I wanted my own place that would be away from my husband's controlling behavior. I think he had thought about the bomb that he had exploded on my face during making. When we were done with everything that we were doing, obviously we cuddled and asked him to talk about the stunt that he had pulled. The audacity and bravery of Paul. He repeated what he had told me. I just didn't know what to do nor say. He then explained why he wanted me to move in with him and silly me. I understood his explanation and thought about my situation at hand, then I agreed to his proposal. I agreed to move in with him and told him that I would speak with my husband first. I don't know if it was love or lust that was controlling me and making me do hasty decisions because I told Paul that I would be moving in the following week. That day I am Sue. I was very high on drugs, or the was just making me lose my mind. So I decided to go back to my matrimonial home to tell Ben that I would be moving out and going to live with my affair partner with Paul. To be honest, I really regret even agreeing to that stupid thing that Paul had done and thought of my parents. So when I got home, I found my husband busy on his MacBook. I greeted him and went straight to the bathroom to take a quick shower so that I would be able to drop the bombshell to my husband. I prayed that he doesn't make a big deal out of it, but my prayers were not answered nor heard. After showering, I talked with Ben, even though that wasn't something I wanted to do. When I gained enough courage, I dropped the bomb while he was unexpecting it. I told him again that I wanted to move out just to have my own place up until Benjamin gets help with his controlling tendencies. As I was still explaining why I wanted to move out, Ben just laughed. You know when I say he laughed. It was like I was a clown with a red nose in him. He asked who I was going to move in with. I told him that it was a friend called Paul. He then burst in loud laughter and told me to K off. You know the kind of laugh that tells you that you are talking crap, and you will never have any kids if you live with the mentality that you have. Ben agreed for me to move out, which was a very hard thing to do because I didn't know what Ben was thinking in his mind. I was somehow scared of the outcome that I would get, and I knew that I had to confess to Ben and wait for his reaction and response. Since that day, my life became miserable. I was paying for the stupid decisions that I had made. My only sin was trusting a stranger and telling him about my marriage. Worst part, even if I tried to deny it, it would anger him even more. So as I was telling him about my AP, he just told me that he knew, which was why he allowed me to move in with him. I couldn't believe that my husband would actually take his sweet time and investigate me, his own wife. I mean, what kind of sick T is that? As I was shocked, he gave me a USB and told me to watch what was inside the USB. He was too cool and calm for my liking, you know. So I played it, and there was me busy getting pumped by another guy. The video was just embarrassing and humiliating and somehow nasty. It actually showed me the real colors of the true Benjamin. After I had moved in with Paul, my life took a very dangerous and drastic turn. I wasn't expecting it, but Ben made sure to serve me with divorce papers first, then making my life visible. A few days later, I received a call from an unknown number. I first hesitated to answer it, but eventually I did, hoping that it would maybe be Ben because I had been trying to reach out to him. I wanted to apologize and maybe try and fix our marriage. That time I was at the mall doing a small shopping. To my surprise, it wasn't the person I had expected, but it was my worst nightmare, Paul. Paul called me and asked me to rush to his house. He has been held hostage and I need to help him. I didn't want to help him, but I somehow found myself telling him that I would be in his house in 30 minutes. He then spoke in a quivering and scared voice and told me that my husband was going to murder him. I had to try and come earlier. I didn't wait any more time. I just took the car keys and went straight to Paul's house. And I got the shock of my life. I saw Ben standing beside Steve, who was bleeding so much. I tried asking Ben to take him to the hospital, at least because he had even hammered him in both hands, but the husband of mine didn't even want to listen. Instead, he just told me to join the fun. Can you imagine that? I had really thought I knew Ben up until that day. I saw a very different side of him, a scary side of him, and I was somehow regretting even getting married to him, but my heart still loved him. What do you call that? I pleaded with him to calm down and reconsider his decision of wanting to hurt people because they had done him wrong. I think I infuriated him more when I said that because he slapped me with the back of the gun that he was holding. I didn't even know that Ben owned a gun. I was so surprised and scared. I didn't know the person who was in front of me. As if that wasn't enough, he took a hammer and hammered his hand with it, saying that he was fixing the hand that was busy exploring people's wives' bodies. What Ben was doing was really gruesome and heartless. The poor guy kept apologizing and begging to be freed. That time I was in awe of what he was doing to the poor guy. He tortured him until I no longer had the power to scream at him and beg him to stop. Even my tears didn't at least faze him. I really thought I knew Ben up until that day. I will never forget it, no matter how much I try to forget. When I tried to ask him to stop and have mercy, he just told me to shut my disgusting mouth and enjoy the show. But little did I know that my turn was actually coming. As if the torture that Ben was doing was enough, he bluntly told me to strip naked in front of the goons that he was going with. I tried resisting and told him that I can't just strip off my clothes in front of his goons and Paul. I would never forget the eye that he ogled me with. He looked at me like I was a disgusting piece of *T. He then demanded me to strip off my clothes before he baptized me with a slap to take out the evilness in me. I didn't know the person that was in front of me. My husband was some dangerous wild animal that I can't even explain. After the threat that he did, I obliged with his command. He then commanded Paul and I to do what we were doing on the video. I couldn't believe Benjamin. I mean, how can one person be so evil towards the person they claim to love, their whole wife? Benjamin was really losing his mind that time, and it almost took people's lives. I couldn't do what he was requiring us to do. He slapped me and told me to do as he said. If I didn't want to do it, he would make sure that I lived in this world to suffer. His words were cutting so deep, I couldn't believe that I had once vowed and said I do to the man, who suddenly changed on me. I eventually did as told, but I opted for sucking his tool, Paul's tool. I did it with tears streaming down my face. Benjamin was just another person that I didn't even know, so I tried doing what he had told me to do. As I was busy sucking and crying, I choked and vomited everything that I had eaten. Paul told him to stop torturing me and that he should torture him instead of me. I didn't understand why Paul would jeopardize his life like that. Ben didn't listen to Paul, but he told him to make me submissive, just like in the video. We did as commanded, but I couldn't keep up with it anymore. I vomited again up until I had no energy left in me. Ben then continued to torture Paul. I just couldn't keep on watching, so I fainted and woke up in the hospital. What I saw really traumatized me, but the problem is that my heart still yearns for Ben, but I'm also terrified of him. I want to see him and have a civil talk, but I don't know how I could reach out to him. What should I do? Is what I feel normal after everything that Ben has put me through, yet I still want him.
My husband was the most insufferable man ever. You couldn't begin to comprehend the ego of the man. He had the audacity to kick me out of his house over a stupid game. He was also playing the game, so I thought he was okay with it. I didn't know my husband was conceited and petty, but do you guys want to know one thing about me? I was more petty. He tried to make me feel stupid and wanted to make sure I regretted it, but I decided to play at his own game. Yes, I played my husband at his own game of making sure I regretted my actions. I had to make sure he felt the regret himself, and it was a drastic war between us. Before this event, we had been cool. I had loved being married to my husband. He had been one of the most charming and nice people I had ever met. This was part of the reason that had attracted me to him. My name is Paige, and I'm 26 years old. My husband's name is Robert, and he's 29 years old. I had met Robert at my friend Lillian's birthday party. He had looked out of place. I had walked up to him, and we got talking. From there, I learned that he was studying to get his master's degree in investment and assets management at the University of Tulsa in Oklahoma. He had come all the way from Tulsa to Norman in OK for Lillian's birthday party because Lillian had told him she wanted him to meet someone. That someone had been me. After Lillian formally introduced us, we hit it off. From there, we quickly became friends and hung out on the weekends when he would drive down from Tulsa to see me or I would go visit him. I wasn't in college because I didn't attend and was always working to make ends meet back then. Anyway, the dynamic worked between us and I got to know his friends and he got to know mine with us and I got to know his friends and hang out with them. And he got to know mine. We started dating 2 years later when he was done with his master's program and began working as a stockbroker for a financial company in Tulsa. And then he told me to move to Tulsa and start living with him. I had been in between jobs at that moment, so I had agreed. Once I moved to Tulsa, I got a job as a customer rep at a 5-star hotel and got to know my husband even more as I was living with him. Again, our dynamic worked even living together. I became closer with his friends and I would have said family, but my husband didn't have any family. He had been orphaned at the age of 6 and had grown up in the system. All the houses he had been put in didn't turn out well for him because of the parents of the families, but he had still remained friends with the people he had met in the system. This is why he had friends and not family. Anyway, after a year of dating, my husband proposed to me. It hadn't been an outstanding ceremony, but we had his friends, and the few friends I had from Norman and the one I had made in Tulsa had cheered for us as my husband bent down on one knee to ask me to be by his side forever. I've been married to my husband for 3 years now, and during that time, I've become a hotel concierge, and he's gone on to open his own firm. We decided on not having kids till at least 5 years into our marriage. It was a joint decision as we wanted to enjoy our time as a married couple before children would come into the mix. We decided we would do all the fun things as couples, go on adventures, attend parties, just basically be childish together until our set mark to have children. I had loved the idea of getting to experience fun things as a married couple. I just hadn't expected my husband to be someone who couldn't take a joke or someone who was overly insecure. This was the beginning of our problems. My husband had been invited to a house party by one of his foster friends. It was meant to be just an indoorsy kind of thing. I'm sure you guys get the vibe. We got there and then discovered it wasn't a small gathering of 5 we had expected. There were over 15 people present, people my husband and I didn't know except the host. The party was quiet for the first 2 hours. You know, people just trying to get to know each other and all. Do you want to know what I was doing during that time? I stuck to my husband like the loving and devoted wife I was. I was literally glued to his side. And my husband was mid-social. He only talked to you if you talked to him. He wasn't the kind to walk up to strike up a conversation, so the people getting to know us were the ones coming around to talk to my husband, despite his broody face. Then, after 2 hours of basic socializing with music in the background, the host, who was my husband's friend, claimed the party was too dull and something needed to be done to liven it up. Boom. Someone suggested a game of spin the bottle, and over half of the guests present agreed. In a room full of adults past the age of 25, over half wanted to play a childish game, and I was one of them. I was excited because it had been a long time since I partook in something like that. Call me childish if you may. But I had raised up my hand along with 8 other people when the host called for volunteers. As you would have guessed, my husband was already boiling with anger, and he told me in hushed words that I shouldn't join in on the game. He had been quite stern when he had said I shouldn't join, but I saw it as him trying to spoil my fun for the evening. After all, he had been the one that had brought me to the party in the first place, and when it began to liven up, he wanted to stop my fun? Ain't no way that was going to happen. I joined in without his consent, and only when the bottle had already landed on one of the ladies in the circle did I realize that it was only singles that had joined in to play the game. Did I regret my actions at that point in time? Yes, I did, but I couldn't back out then because the point of our whole pact, my husband and I, was to be adventurous and so fun in our marriage before we had to start carrying on the responsibility of children that other people would be envious of what we have. And if I had backed put, then they would see my husband as overbearing, which he was, and they would see me as no fun, which I wasn't. So I stuck to the game. What was the worst thing that could have happened? I realized the worst thing that could happen a few minutes later when the bottle mouth pointed to me and the bottle end pointed to a guy that wasn't part of my husband's friend group. Then the guy dared me to take off a piece of my clothing. The murmurs had started up immediately because other people apart from the stupid dimwit had realized I was a married woman, and they were all looking back and forth between my husband and I to see if an alpha fight would break out. Well, my husband didn't do anything, and the stupid dimwit finally realized there was a ring on my finger and then settled for a peck on the cheek. I could do that with ease, and all the tension would calm. That was what I had thought to myself. I was wrong as always. The tension didn't calm. In fact, it grew worse because as I turned to give the stranger a peck, and he shifted his face, which made me give him a kiss on his mouth. I gave a stranger a kiss by mistake, and my husband had seen it. Everyone that had been around the circle had pretended not to see that the guy had turned on purpose. They all just kept silent and avoided my eyes. But my husband had seen it. I was ashamed at first, of course. I had been ashamed because one random stranger had gotten the best of me. He had turned his head deliberately. Apparently, my husband hadn't seen it as the mistake it was. He saw it as defiance, and he didn't spare any words in telling me how I had disrespected him and blah, blah, blah. He was mad, but I was mad too because I had also tried explaining that the kiss had been a mistake. It had never been my intention to kiss a guy I had no idea who he was. However, what my husband was mad about was the fact that I had gone to play the game in the first place. According to him, if I hadn't gone to play the game, the kiss would have never happened. Can you guys imagine that? Wasn't he supposed to take my side first? Why was I the first on his list for appropriation of blame instead of the guy who had asked for a peck and turned a harmless peck into a mouth-to-mouth kiss? Well, I didn't argue further that night, and I remembered clearly that I had apologized. I had gone to sleep with the thought that all was finally well. You guys wouldn't believe the tantrum my husband threw the next day and the following days after it. He never let me forget it. And do you guys want to know the cherry on top of the cake? He kicked me out. After a full week of enduring his tantrums over a stupid spin-the-bottle game, my husband came back one evening from work and said he couldn't bear to see my face knowing that I had disrespected him in front of people he knew and didn't know. Can you guys begin to comprehend that lame reason? I had wounded his ego, and instead of maybe talking about it or maybe listening to me, because I wasn't the one wrong in any way, he decided to throw me out. I just knew it had been his friends. There had been no other logical reason why my husband would make that kind of rash decision. Well, by the next morning, my husband had brought out my luggage from my room and said we needed to take a break. Who in the world takes a break from marriage over one stupid kiss that had been a mistake? I was disappointed because I had thought he would sleep it off because it was mostly frustrations from work, and it wouldn't be a big deal, but I was proved wrong by the time morning came around. You guys can't begin to imagine my shock at waking up to get dressed for work and seeing my husband with my suitcase in his hand telling me he needed a break from our marriage. And do you know what he did when I told him I wasn't leaving? He became more justified in his action. He told me that this was my problem. According to him, I didn't respect his opinions. How was I supposed to respect him kicking me out of his house in a city where I didn't know anyone closely to ask them for a place to stay? But my husband hadn't put that fact into consideration. He just swung his ego around and didn't like that I hadn't sucked up to his stupid alpha tendencies. I left my husband's house to go and stay in one of the staff's rooms in the hotel where I worked. I had to stoop low to ask my coworkers if they had an extra place for me to sleep at their houses. To say I had been beyond livid wasn't even going to cut it, all because of a stupid kiss. If I had actually kissed the dimwit, then okay, I wouldn't have been so angry, but I hadn't deliberately kissed the man and see what I was suffering. So I decided to actually justify the reason why I was suffering so I wouldn't be suffering for nothing. After all, my husband had said he wanted us to take a break from our marriage, and I was going to do just that. And I did just that, you guys. I sought out the reason for the break in my marriage and decided to fully go for the kiss. Luckily, if you wanted to find anybody in Tulsa, just go by the major convenience store. They were bound to come by sooner or later, and the dimwit happened by. I had bumped into him on purpose, and he remembered me. Of course he would. I wasn't at all forgettable, except to my husband. Anyway, we hit it off and began going out. On one of those outings, when he had escorted me back to the staff room of the hotel I was staying in, I had sneakily grabbed him in and took the kiss that had caused a whole lot of trouble, and believe me, it had been worth it. From then on, we began sleeping together. This lasted for 2 whole months, and in that period of time, my husband never made to contact me, not even once. He never showed up at my workplace to ask of me or call my family to know if I had been doing well. Nothing. Nada. Meanwhile, the dimwit that had accidentally kissed me was treating me like I was his lady. I know you all must be wondering if he didn't know that I was married. He knew, but he also thought I had gone through a divorce. I lied that my husband and I being at the party was our last leap at trying to save our marriage, but after the party it didn't work out, and we officially divorced. My affair hadn't even seemed to mind. He treated me like an egg, thinking I had just gone through a rough divorce. It had been as easy as that, and I was having the time of my life. My affair took me on dates, was fun, didn't get worked up over something like my husband did, and wasn't one to throw tantrums. He listened, and I had thought I had hit the jackpot, you guys, with no husband attached to my status. I was happy. I was happy because even if my husband caught me cheating, there was no way he was going to blame it on me. He had been the one to insist on taking a break in our marriage after all. He hadn't specified what taking a break meant. I was so certain he was having the time of his life and expecting me to be somewhere in the corner sulking over the fact that he hadn't called me for 2 whole months. I mean, I might as well live my life like I wasn't married, right? The next week, my husband decided that he should call me. Like, could you imagine? He thought maybe I finally learned my lesson and we could start to live together again. My husband actually said that. As if our marriage was like a movie you could press pause and then play for. Lol, I had never lived a more hilarious moment in my life. You wanted me to learn to respect you, and what you do is kick me out of the house in the hopes that I would come crawling at your feet and begging you for forgiveness. My husband had another thing coming. I wasn't going to go back to him until he was the one who begged me to return. I wasn't a plaything. I was his wife, and he had treated me like garbage all because his friends had told him I didn't respect him from my actions at that stupid spin the bottle game. To be frank, I had never even wanted to go to that party, but my husband had coaxed me to go. I went to the party because of him. I stuck to his side the entire boring night, and when I got the opportunity to do something fun, he tried to coddle me. Did that seem fair? Then after he threw his tantrums for a full week, he went drinking with his friends and had listened to their drunk rantings about respect and their stupid ego and had got back and told me he wanted a break from marriage because I didn't respect him. And even if I didn't, it had just been a one-time thing. He decided that would be punishment for a one-time incident where I had disrespected him. Well, on the day he called me to tell me I could come back to his house, that our break was over, that day I decided my husband was going to grovel. And I succeeded. Yes, I did. My husband began calling me every day the following week after his first call when I had told him in plain terms that my break wasn't over yet. He started showing up to my workplace, disturbing my phone and my coworkers. All the things I had wanted him to do, but it was too late at that moment. He got me flowers and all the stuff that would make a woman weak in the knees, but I wasn't budging. I didn't plan on budging, but something else happened. I found out that I was pregnant. And before you all come for me that I had gotten pregnant for my affair and wanted to plant it on my husband, that wasn't true. Here was what happened. I had fainted one day at work and was rushed to the hospital. The doctor told me I had put my baby under great risk, and when I told him there was no way I was pregnant, he confirmed that I was already 6 months along. I had asked how it was possible I wasn't showing yet, and why I had felt no symptoms of the pregnancy, and the doctor told me my pregnancy was probably a cryptic one, and that wasn't a bad thing, as long as I didn't stress myself too hard. I only began seeing my affair 2 months from that time, so there was no way it was from him. So I had to go back to my husband. But I didn't tell him I was pregnant just yet. I wanted to see how he would treat me because in my mind I didn't think our marriage would work again. Believe me, I wanted it too, but I didn't think it would because I knew my husband was going to find out about my affair. When I got back to his house, I knew our marriage was a ticking time bomb, but I decided to enjoy it because my husband decided he was going to keep groveling. He took me out on dates, shopping, sent me money unexpectedly, basically did things that had shown he was sorry, and I was on the lookout to see when the thread of good things would snap. My affair had started his own madness movement. He would disappear for days on end, and I just cut him off from there. My husband was back to his senses, so I had no need for him. Remember when I said it was only a matter of time before my husband reverted back to his tantrums? It wasn't even up to 2 weeks before he brought up the topic of me disrespecting him, and he told me I shouldn't do it again, or he was going to leave me. There was another party that night that another one of his friends was hosting, and it was mandatory I attended with him, for a reason I hadn't known. But everything happened for a reason. The party was the snapping factor of my marriage. Before the party, I had planned to tell my husband, but he had gotten me so outraged with the "don't disrespect me" talk, so I didn't tell him then and planned to do so after the party. Another mistake I made. My sleeping with another man was exposed at the party. I mean, you couldn't have written a better controversial script than the one that had happened at that party. It was so unbelievable. The man I'd had an affair with decided to show up at the party and saw me at the party with my husband and decided his ego couldn't take a little trip. He walked up to me and started yapping so loud that he got the attention of the party. When the murmurings increased, I knew they had caught wind of our conversation, and it wasn't long until my husband came into the conversation and understood what was going on. The look on his face was comical, because I had done the very thing he told me not to do when we had left for the party. My husband left the party without me, and when I got back home, he had locked me out and thrown my things out. Thank God I hadn't fully moved out of the staff room when that had happened. The next week, a lawyer called me and told me my husband wanted me to sign divorce papers, and I was to meet him at the office. I got there and my husband was already waiting for me. He was livid and flung the divorce papers in my face. Then that's when I dropped the bomb. I told him I was carrying his baby. Of course he didn't believe it, and at that point in time I couldn't be bothered if he believed it or not. I signed the divorce papers willingly because I didn't want to be married to him. I already knew our marriage was over, just like I had said before. If you're wondering if he asked for a paternity test, he did. My baby was born 2 months later, and my ex-husband got the paternity test and found out it was his daughter. Do you know this man had the effrontery to take me to court to derive me of my right to take care of my child? He wanted to take my child from me. Luckily, the court didn't find any tangible evidence that I was a bad citizen and granted us both joint custody of our child, and he was fined for wasting their time. Served him right. Next time, he wouldn't be so stupid. I went back to Norman after the court settlement, and we agreed to him coming to see our child once in a month till my daughter grew older for him to be taking her on weekend visit to Tulsa. That's how my marriage ended, and in my heart, I have no grudges against my husband, but I hope he fixes his ego trip before he gets married again. And if you don't support my side of the story, I honestly don't care.